Today I bring you an episode with Taylor Steele. Taylor is a former professional figure skater who was touring in Asia with Disney on Ice when the pandemic struck last year. And so her and I's stories very, very similarly align in the way that we were both forced to come home, adapt, pivot, and basically change both our directions moving forward. And so it was very shortly after the Derek Mathers interview when she reached out very excited, very eager to want to contribute and to get on board with sending these positive messages. And so we both believe that whether or not these messages impact you directly or indirectly, that if they don't resonate directly with you, that they probably resonate with somebody very close to you. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're super excited to show you this here today, and enjoy.
Going.
Taylor, how's it going? I'm doing good. A few technical difficulties, me
Good.
losing my way through, but we're here.
Yeah.
How are you?
I sign on. I'm good. I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've actually talked to someone about this that wasn't my therapist or my husband. So it's a little nerve-wracking, but I don't know, I'm excited.
I have that game day kind of get me on the ice, let's go kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Every time I get on a conversation like this, my whole day is a bit angsty, a little anxious, a little scrambled, maybe imagining too much what is to say, but then once kind of things get rolling, things start to get a little bit more comfortable. But
yeah,
I'm nervous too, is basically what I'm saying. So for those of us who have seen an episode like this before, my name's Kevin Raine. I'm a professional hockey player who is currently advocating for mental health awareness, and in order to do that, I am having conversations on the topic with guests like Taylor. Anybody that's watched previously has seen episodes with my mom, ex-hockey players, people I don't know. And so this is another conversation with somebody I don't know, but somebody who I was excited to hear from when she reached out to express her gratitude and excitement around being able to contribute to this. And so thank you so much for being here, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So we don't know each other at all. It was just this random girl sending you an inbox. I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna sound like a fangirl. But yeah, like you said, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, and the fact that I get to be a part of it is really cool. I'm living in London, Ontario now. I've been a figure skater my entire life. I started when I was 2. I was a competitive athlete. I was a pair skater, so I was the one getting thrown through the air. I did internationals. I was on junior national team. I was on senior national team for a year. And then injuries happened. I quit skating, hated everything about it for a year, and then ended up doing shows professionally in Europe. And then the last 5 years, pre-COVID, I was a principal performer with Disney on Ice. So I got to live out my 5-year-old dream of being a Disney princess every day. So.
Yeah. And so who were you? I don't know them, but who were you?
I was Rapunzel, the blonde hair and the tower and the whole shebang.
Nice. And so,
yeah.
Like many of us, carrying on about our day, carrying on about our life, COVID hits, and pretty quickly, whether it was weeks or how quickly was the transition for you, basically out of that lifestyle and into this new one?
New life. For us, we were in Asia actually. So I had just gotten back to tour after an injury. We were there for about 8 weeks, but we were in Indonesia the first time things started getting canceled. We were supposed to go to Hong Kong and Singapore, and we had this really sweet tour lined up, and they were like, okay, we're canceling Hong Kong. And we're like, oh, here we go. And then we got sent to a show in the States. And then one morning we were going to Singapore, 2 hours later, we weren't. And then it just kind of all snowballed from there. We were actually in Phoenix, Arizona. We hadn't even opened the show. They loaded in everything. Doors were about to open. They had a company meeting, and they were like, okay, all of the tours are canceled. Everyone's going home. Indefinitely, we don't know what the plan is, but we're like, oh, we'll just we'll go to Australia. And then we flew home, and we're like, oh no, the whole company was terminated. So that was kind of a really abrupt ending for us. But we were really lucky. My fiance and I, we get to we're together at least. A lot of our friends aren't, but we came home kind of I think a lot of us, I don't know if you were in the same boat, but you were like, oh, it's only going to be a couple months. We'll be back to work soon. And then as it started unfolding and the world started like completely stopped, and that like about a year ago, I think it started to hit us that it was like this was the end. This wasn't like a
Mhm.
like a pause, but yeah, it was a thing. And then my biggest thing is I love being busy, because when I'm busy, I don't have to think about things.
Mhm.
And I came home, took like a semester and a half of courses at once, because I was like, I might as well just finish school, like hammered out before we go back on the road, which we weren't doing. And I learned burnout was real.
Mhm.
And I think that was my, like, not my first big notion of like, wow, maybe I'm not okay. Maybe like I am trying to process things. But I just had a point where like I was burnt out. Nothing could cheer me up. I'd
Mhm.
watch a Disney movie, like tears are streaming, ugly crying, like that kind of thing. And it was the first time that I had to make the decision that I was like, okay, maybe I'm not okay. Maybe I do need to talk to someone, but like I know I don't want to keep feeling like this.
Right.
So then that was my like big first inclination of my like myself of knowing, being like, okay, maybe this is time, because I'd seen a therapist like before for something else, but this was the first time I had to like make the adult decision and go talk to someone, kind of thing. Which, like, I sat in her office and I cried, and she's wonderful, and like knowing that how I was feeling was validated, that I wasn't just going crazy and like I wasn't broken and things like that. But like I don't know what your transition home was like, but I felt like we just kind of got thrown to the wolves.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're an elite skater. You are top class. You're traveling the world. You're having great success, and then that's all taken away from you. That's stripped away from you. You're at home. You know that keeping busy will keep you occupied and away from getting to think about that. I'm very much the same. Totally, totally understand. Um, and then so, what did that look like when you transitioned into getting help? Like you kind of realized, and then who did you seek out? Who did you confide in? And what did that look like specifically?
um More like I kind of started doing some research on my own of just like therapists in the area and like that kind of thing. Like I knew I didn't want to go see a psychologist, because I was like, I don't think that's where I'm at. It was just when I came home, when I blew out my shoulder the year before, it was actually my sister that had suggested this like network of therapists. And I kind of like went back in that direction and ended up with like a counselor therapist kind of situation. And it um yeah, it was just kind of, I didn't really tell anyone,
Mhm.
just because I don't like I didn't want to belittle someone else's feelings or someone else's traumas or what other people were going through. Like my fiance and I had definitely had conversations that like we were both kind of struggling, but like I'm not a trained professional, he's not a trained professional, and we're both trying to help each other, but we didn't really know how.
Mhm.
Um, so the first time I saw the therapist, it was just kind of like laying everything out like on the table. And I'm like, I just feel like people have it so much worse than me. And that was my biggest thing. And that was a lot of my hesitation with this, and getting back to you with what I wanted to talk about, was my biggest thing was I didn't want to belittle someone else's trauma. Like I knew, like I had been through something and I knew that I was struggling, but I didn't want to make light of the situation. I didn't want to,
Mhm.
like I just wasn't sure how to go about it. But like even that first hour with my therapist, she like looked at me and she's like, no, you're processing trauma and grief. Like you lost your job. That's a pretty big thing. Like
Yeah.
your life has completely changed. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not crazy. And we like went through like that I was depressed, and that like the like stages of grief and things like that. And working through the trauma of like, you're not a Disney princess anymore. Like this could be over forever. And how are we gonna move on from it? Like how do we make you your best self to get like on the other side of it? um yeah,
I think,
it was a lot of crying. I'm a crier,
oh,
but
I hear you. I'm with you there too. Um, I think uh, I know myself too. There's so often when I'm able to see both the pain I'm going through, but also how good things are. And so I invalidate my own pain. And so that conversation of like, I know it's not that bad, but like this sucks. right? And so you feel awful, but then when you maybe stack it against somebody else's experience, you think, well, that would be worse, or that would be not as bad as this. And you're measuring it out versus, just look at yourself and how are you feeling? And okay, well, I'm not feeling very good. Okay, tell me about it. Well, my whole entire life was totally uprooted, and now I'm at home trying to figure out what to do next. Yeah, of course you're in pain, right? And so somebody to sit across from you and say, hey, like, we're not worried about this person who had this tragedy happen to them. We're not worried about these people who are currently going through this. Your pain is yours, and it's as painful as you feel it, not how maybe other people might decide it might feel, right? And so the most important thing we can do is to acknowledge, like, hey, you're in pain, tell me why. And yes, no wonder, right? And so I think in relating to you, when I came home, I was 2 months of kind of just hoping, waiting, not really sure. And then I too got busy, worked construction full time, literally just to distract. It was 15 guys on the road, paving the road, which was perfect. It was a direct replacement for hockey because I got to hang out with the boys every single day. And now the difference between hockey and construction is that instead of 3 hours a day, I got to hang out with them for 15 hours a day, which, given circumstance, perfect. But again, you talk about burnout, and we're working, we're not sleeping, I'm drinking a thermos of coffee every day. By the time that episode ended, there was a major, like, okay, like, I haven't fixed anything. I'm still, like, in pain. I still have things to, like, work through. And so how am I going to do that? And so, even for example, getting on here to speak with you, thank you so much for sending me hey, like, let's get this going, because I've had, this kind of on the back burner for the meantime, just because I've been doing a lot to focus on my own needs at the minute, right? Just this alone, like this project and what I want to bring to it in my perfectionism, which, we'll get to talk about.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to talk about. If I'm doing this, I want it to be perfect. I want it to be every Tuesday at 9 a.m. I want it to be weekly. I want to make sure I have the best chats, the most engaging, blah, 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 blah. But then every week, if I'm loading myself like that, well, then I'm just in a constant trance of, like, oh, I'm going to talk to them. I think we can connect on this and this point and this. And, like, I'm just choreographing constantly. It's exhausting. Yeah. And then you have the chat. Yeah. And then now I get to go edit it and rewatch. And now I get to rewatch it multiple times. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to put on yourself when you're working a full-time schedule and you're trying to take care of yourself, trying to have a social life, trying to maintain relationships. But so
I think that's been the blessing with COVID, is that, like, I haven't had to go anywhere. Like, I had that, like, time to be like, like, I can stay home and watch Netflix, and like, it's good. Like, I don't know. I've kind of enjoyed the quiet. Yeah, but now, like, at the same time, like, I am not, like, a partier, but, like, I would be like, I would go to a country bar right now. Like, I would go, but it's just like that roller coaster of not knowing of what you want.
And so you touched on therapy and that you're speaking to somebody. Are you currently speaking to someone?
Yeah, I've been seeing her less frequently.
Right.
Just like I've gotten my homework, and like, part of the discussion was seeing, like, how things were going, and, like, I will make the appointment, like, if I know I'm, like, like, I'm having a rough go, like, I just need to talk it out and, like, be pointed in another direction. But I'm seeing her less frequently, which has been kind of nice. Like, initially I was seeing her every other week, like, consistently since, like, August.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been less frequent, which I think has been, like, kind of makes me feel good that I don't need her. But I also think she's awesome. So I'm like, oh, I kind of miss talking to her. But
well, you get to, I really enjoy when I get a chance to speak to my therapist, regardless of how it's going, because it's just another chance to build on what we've previously seen, right? And so I've been through, call it, a couple cycles with my therapist where, most recently, given the work I've been doing on my own and the connections I've been able to make at home, and the supports that are in place that are not her. Most recently, within the last couple of weeks, she's kind of cut me loose. And I'm kind of sitting there. She's like, so are we going to meet tomorrow? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's just going to be an hour to brag about how good I'm feeling this week. I'm in that kind of up or that neutral or whatever we like to call that. But then there'll be like one bad day where I'll just be like, oh man, like who was I to think I was even close to like being cut loose? Like I got to get back on board full time. But then at least given what she's been able to teach me, um, that come out from the bottom is way quicker, based on the strategy she's able to provide me and the dialogue you have on it as you continue to learn and stuff like that. And so, what has been the biggest thing for you? What is the biggest take you've brought with you from your therapy? What's helping you right now?
Just knowing that like I feel like there's a couple things. Like for me, it's knowing, I was thinking about this all day. Like what the answer to that would be.
Yeah.
Knowing that like my trauma is my trauma and that like everyone, it's all about perception. Like it's all about what an individual person goes through.
Mm.
And being able to like step back, like I'm very hot-headed. So being able to like step back from a situation and be like, why do I feel this way? Like why do I think I'm this? Like what triggered me to do this? And like finding, like going back to the root, because sometimes it's like not anything related, it's just like a similar feeling, and then I just like I build and I build and I build to the point where I just like can't function. So
Right.
learning how to like step back, take that breath, and like observe the situation like from a different perspective and things like that has been a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
And I like just finding gratitude in like the little things. I think it's so easy to just dwell on like how awful COVID is and how we're all cooped up and things, but there are so many little things. And like I find waking up in the morning and journaling and writing, like I'm so grateful for like little things. Like last week it was my bed. The other day it wasn't 13 degrees in our house. It was like little things like that. Just starting your day and starting my day off like that has been a huge godsend to me, because you're finding that silver lining and it kind of just starts my mood for the rest of the day. Like, yeah, there are days when it like I'll sit like in our kitchen and cry that I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life and I don't know if I'm doing the right thing and things like that. But in the bigger picture, like, there are so many things that I've learned to be grateful for and like live in the moment versus the bigger picture of what the world looks like.
Right.
I think those, and like I think you've touched on that too, is like there's like the world is so different compared to like what we know. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to find the silver lining and all of that, and just
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. It takes work to shift your own perspective in a good way. You talked about gratitude. That's something I'm finding a lot of lately, but it's something you have to look for. Right? It's something you have to acknowledge every day, so that you can see what you had rather than what you lack. Right. And so the ability to simplify and wake up, and a routine is a big thing for me, because it allows me those small wins. And so if I successfully go about my morning and I'm winning all morning, nice, got that, nice, got that, that's huge. That sets me up for an entire day. But I actually made a journal entry just last week. I had an awful day last week, one day in particular, and it kind of turned into like a 2-day thing where I was just miserable. And so what that looks like for me is, it's a lot of negative self-talk. I'm like beating myself up. I'm my own bully in that case. And so it took me all of writing about my morning to be like, no wonder that's what the last 2 days looked like, because that was what started it. And so basically it's a written, call it like a script of how my morning went and exactly what I saw in the morning that made me go, fucking idiot, or fuck sakes, right? These like negative, like just
Yeah.
grind you down. But after writing that, I instantly felt better because I realized what come after. And I was like, oh, but it all started because of that, which was, you literally got off on the wrong step and you let it bleed into the rest of your day and then into the next day. And so kind of finding that source kind of like gave me that sense of like, okay, well, at least I know why it started. And so if I fix that, then the rest of my, I can move forward remembering that. And so now I have more emphasis on that. Now I've had a good week since. And so gratitude, writing, as you said, as I've said, have been huge for me. And I think just that dialogue with the therapist to say like, this is what that looks like. This is how I feel about it. And then I love how she's able to do this with me is she calls my bullshit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
And
feel like I don't feel attacked, but you're like, I needed that, but like also like, ow, okay. That was a little harsh, but okay, thanks.
and I think how, I don't know how to ask this. I guess what I'm wondering is how do we encourage people to be accepting of one's own faults? Right? Because literally I get to sit in with my therapist and say this, that, and the other. And then she gets to tell me that I'm being, a little unreasonable with expectations, or you're projecting your perfectionism. Well, what do you expect of that person? What do you need from that person? I'm sitting there like, I guess not really much. And so it's like, okay, so what you're doing is you're imagining how you would live their life or do their job or act in that role. And because it's not how you would do it, you're letting it ruin your day.
Yeah.
And so then here I am like, fuck, you're right. But then at least I have somebody who I'm confiding in that I trust, and I have to give them that trust and allow them to call me on that. Right. But now, since being able to do that and say, be vulnerable with my therapist, now I have that relationship with my mom, where before, if she was to call me on bullshit, I'd be like, whatever, mom. Or, friends or people who I now have these conversations with. And so I think that comes with a lot of work too, being able to get to that point where you open up
Yeah.
to
No, for sure.
to be told that you're wrong, or to accept that you're wrong, or to think that, hey, maybe I can be a little bit better in this situation.
Yeah, I like my biggest takeaway from this, and I mentioned it in the like initial email I sent you, was that I wanted to be able to be that person for someone else that I needed. And I didn't need someone to talk to. I needed someone to share their story to make me feel like I wasn't alone.
Mm-hmm.
And to make me feel like I wasn't the only one going through this, the one that felt this. And I mentioned this when we had our like quick FaceTime a couple weeks ago. It was like you and Derek were talking about like that feeling of it's so good to come home, but then like there's nothing like going back on the road, and there's nothing like going back on tour and things like that, like those mutual feelings. And I find, for me at least, finding that mutual connection with someone was really hard. And I think that was a lot of like the point of a lot of my stress was people didn't have ill intentions. It was they were trying to understand a situation that they could never understand. So it was oh, you'll find something else. And it's like, would you tell a doctor you'll find something else? Like, are you going to tell like the nurse or the engineer, like, oh, you'll find something else, it'll be fine. It's time to stop playing around. And that it didn't make me angry. It just, I think it broke me, because like here we were trying to we're trying to start completely over in a place that like, yes, we've lived, but we haven't been more than a month or two at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt like the whole world was against us. And I don't know if you felt something similar, but like we just felt like we were like, it was us against the world, and we were both broken and struggling, and just, yeah. So just finding that voice from someone, just being like, hey, like, I got you, like, you're not alone. And like, I think we had this conversation too, like, I'm not here, I don't like, I have my people, you have your people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to, I have my own traumas and my own things to work on. I don't want someone to be like, hey, can I talk to you? Like, I would love to be that, but I know there are better ways about it, if that makes sense. Just because we have enough stuff on our own, and I want to be here for people in a sense of like a hope that like it will get better. You're not alone, and like there are really good options to get professional help.
Right.
Just because I'm not trained for that. And like I love helping people, but I've learned not to take on more than I can chew, if that makes sense.
No, I totally appreciate what you have to say there. Basically saying that, the opportunity to get in on this conversation allows you to have a bit of a story told, some dialogue to encourage without opening yourself up to maybe a direct line of like, hey, like, can we talk? Can I lay this on you? And that's something I've really tried to portray in these videos is I'm not a professional, and I, while doing these videos, care, but to have messages come through directly to me seeking help is something like, hey man, like I appreciate you telling me that, but I'm not the person that can help you with this. Is there anyone you feel you can confide in? Is there anyone that you can share this with immediately? And I think by maintaining that, it was a good friend of mine, girlfriend now, actually, new girl in my life. She's awesome, super supportive, a huge reason for my current happiness and success. She used the analogy of the boat, acknowledging that we're kind of all in our own little boats. And so if I was to pull my boat up to yours and you were sinking, I have to worry about my own boat yet, right? Like I can try to coach you, I can try to help you, but what I cannot do is get into your boat. I can't be there to try to do everything, and I can't be there to try to help your sinking boat from sinking while mine floats away. And so I just love that analogy because it represents the fact that you have to take care of your own first, and if you're too busy tending to everyone else, well then you're a little lost, right? And so yeah, that's I always go back to that. I had another thought that has totally slipped me.
I'll jump in on you there.
Jump in, please.
Yeah, so my therapist, she, in one of her very blunt, she's like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And
Right.
it's like one of those like cliche Instagram things I find.
Yeah.
But, and I like got stuck in the Instagram, just like hanging out, just scrolling away.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a post, and it was like within like, I'm gonna say forever of each other, because that's how deep I was in the internet.
Right.
There was one that says you can't pour from an empty cup. And then there was another one that said, if you don't fill my cup, this no longer serves me.
Right.
Which like, I think that's a little like harsher way of saying it, but I'm one of those people that I very much absorb my surroundings. So if the people around me are like, this sucks, that sucks, I hate this, the world's so bad, I like absorb their emotions, and then I end up in this hole. So I've been like really, really conscious of like who I spend my time with and who I talk to, and like the accounts I follow on Instagram was another big one, and the shows I watch and things like that. Like I didn't, like, that you absorb the things like in your world, but I didn't realize how much toxicity was in my life until I was able to like step back and be like, whoa, okay, like maybe I don't need to follow these bachelor accounts. I don't need to follow like I don't need to watch this reality TV and things like that. Like that sounds so silly that I like had this like epiphany, but it's just one of those things. And I feel like the world right now is just so heavy. And it was one of the reasons I like went to this therapist, was I was like, the world just feels heavy and I just want to cry, because I feel like everyone is struggling, and I want to be the one to be like, hey guys, like I've been told to turn down the pep a few times, and I'm like, I get it, but I'm like, I'm in a really good mood, and I don't want to see everyone miserable, and okay, cool, find the happy medium. But yeah, I just find the world so heavy, and just like, I get it, but, and then I feel bad for being happy. Do you get that ever? Like you're such a good place and other people aren't, that you're like, am I doing this wrong? Should I?
No,
I think that's
understand. I understand that to a degree, because but I think that's the boat. I think that's going back to the boat, right? Like if you can, and as you said, and this is something I've done to my feeds right now versus how they might have been previously. Memes are funny and memes are this, but they're kind of, if there's memes that'll kind of make light of a really bad situation, right? Making a joke about like a bad personality trait or a bad whatever. But if those are what you're constantly seeing, like, if I look at a meme and it's relatable, which they're intended to be, but it's relatable in a way that like is destructive or bad or self-sabotaging, etc. I get to look at it and go, no kidding, right? And then you have yourself in that mindset where if you're feeding yourself these gratitude, positivity, forgiveness, all these like things that are feeding you rather than kind of like deflating you, well, what a difference, right? And so my feeds right now are very good. And, of course now, that all that other stuff is gone. Now, when I see stuff that is on there, say like an old account that I follow, like, okay, like let's get rid of that. And so you're kind of making that transition away from what isn't serving you to what you want to see so that you can continue to have good days, day after day after day. The thought came back to me on what I wanted to say previously, but then it slipped yet again because we got around
Write it down. Write it down.
No, seriously, I need a notepad. I got to get it all down. Do we have a time here? Do we know how much time you have?
I'm good.
You're good?
I'm good. I've got till 7 my time. So we've got like another hour and a half if we need it.
I want to go back to what you were talking about. When you reached out to me, you were very much on you're an athlete, I'm an athlete. Now we're both ex-athletes, so now I can relate to you. And correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm not recalling correctly, but you were like, yes, I just want to be able to like make sure that athletes like understand that they're not alone, blah, blah, blah. And I think I threw you a bit of a curveball in response. I told you.
Like, right. Like, oh, I was like, oh my God, he's right. I need to like, oh my God. Yeah, no. And you were like, athletes are people. And just, you said it so bluntly. And I was like, I think I was on such a high and I was so nervous that I was like, yeah, you're right. Okay. And actually after our conversation, I just like went and like that last couple weeks, I was like, he said a lot of like really, like you said a lot of really good things. I think that I just needed to hear in the sense of like, we're just people. Like athletes aren't just people, like all of us, every single one of us. I just think that like in my mind, we're like a different breed in the sense of like in my head, like we think we're invincible. And when you said it just so abruptly, I was like, yeah, he's right. Okay. And like, you, like, I don't know, a few things you said, I was just like, and when I asked you if you would go back to play and you were like, I don't know, like what would, like, I want to, like, yeah, everyone wants that Cinderella story, like movie about them, like the comeback season. And like, I would love that too with like my shoulder and never getting back totally. And then you said, but like, I don't know if I'd accomplish anything that I haven't already done. And when I hung up, I brought it up to my fiance and I was like, he's right. And honestly, I think that was a big, like kind of relief for us. Like that opened up a really honest conversation of like, do we want to go back because we want to go back or do we want to go back just to like say that we did?
Right.
So I thought that was a big thing. And just, yeah, the athlete thing, I was like slap right in the face. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that's so awkward. What do I do?
Yeah, you were making great points, all very valid, all very like totally on point. But they all surrounded like the athlete. And I basically just told you that, while we have our own problems and we all strive to be very great and we all strive to be this and we all want to be perfect and all that, people are striving for these things too, whether it be in their work or their personal or their online image or whatever. And so, basically just saying that we were athletes, we had our lives taken away after COVID. There's people, they had their jobs lost after COVID, their houses, their
exactly.
their this. And so, no, it was really cool to get your message the other day saying that, because I was like, oh, it's cool to hear directly that a message resonated, and it's cool to kind of hit somebody with that, like, oh, and then you start to kind of dig. And so
like, and for me too, like I've been a skater my whole life. Like there was not a single time that I wasn't an athlete or a skater, and that was a big part of my identity. actually opened up the conversation with my therapist. I was like, he called me out. She's like,
yes, I'm in the building. Hey, there's an outtake. Yeah, hopefully she heard that. I'm currently at school, and so I just
yeah, no worries.
had a PA announcement asking if I was still around so that they can decide whether or not they're going to lock up or not.
Yeah, so like our conversation, like when you called me out, like I ended up going to my therapist later that week, just like I happened to be going, and I was like, so he called me out like pretty hard, and she like laughed. She's like, didn't like that. I was like, I mean, like, you didn't really know me, and I like was really offended. And she was like, but like, she's like, did you feel like it was attack on like your identity because you don't know how to identify other than as an athlete? And I was like, maybe. And then that opened that whole conversation. It was like, okay, fine. Like, yeah, it's like being better, like coloring in the corner.
I think it's a healthy conversation, at least for me. You know, I'm imagining me being on the other side of that, you know, to take a look, and whether you're an athlete currently or not, to kind of say like, you know, how do I identify? How do I want to identify? The biggest and best thing that's happened to me over this year is that I've realized that if I was to go back to playing this year, it would be the first time I went back without feeling I had to.
Yeah.
Right. And anytime I've gone back to playing previously, it's been always a matter of like, what else am I going to do? Right. And so within this last year, and you might be able to attest to this too, I've proven to myself that, okay, well, if I'm not an athlete, at least I still am able to adapt. At least I'm still able to like change course and like do other things. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But
That it's just like feeling like for me, like I skated and that was it. Like I played soccer when I was 6 and picked flowers and then that was it. And then I just skated. I skated my whole life. And I didn't know what else to do because I never had to do. So now that like I'm home and it's like you said, like the skills you've learned as an athlete are actually quite like you're learning to adapt in a new environment. You're constantly changing. Like the word for the last year that I've heard a lot is pivot. Like you're constantly pivoting and learning how to deal with those changes and being able to like step back and kind of not like pat myself on the back, but give myself more credit for those skills that I do have that I feel like a lot of people have overlooked because like to like the outside world, you just played a sport. Like you just like performed. Like to people, I was just a Disney princess or you were just a hockey player, but they don't see that bigger picture. Like you lived in another country, like you've traveled around, like you've changed environments, and a lot of people don't know how to do that. So I think it's given me an opportunity, and I think you'd agree that you need to give yourself more credit for what we've actually accomplished in the last year and like what we've accomplished in our like professional careers kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting mentality when you're call it at the top of your sport or top of your whatever you're doing, and you're so hungry for that next couple percent or that next step or that next stride that you totally fail to look at what is truly available to you. Sounds good. I'm the last one in the school, I was just told. But if you have a moment to like truly reflect and acknowledge like, man, look at this road behind me. It's unlike anyone else's. It's my own. I have this, I have this, I have this. I'm, you know, healthy unless otherwise injured or whatever. But, you know, we're so in a state of lack that we fail to have that gratitude. And that's in sport, that's in life. That's so many of us with the online and all that other stuff. But right now, I'm very grateful. I am very proud, very happy. I take my wins every day in small doses. I do pat myself on the back, and knowing what I've seen of you in this 45 minutes that we've discussed, the half-hour chat we had a couple weeks ago, I know that you're very well spoken, very stand up, very caring, and have no doubt that you have much to praise yourself for. And one of which being joining me here today to discuss a bit about your journey, a bit about, you know, what it is that had you bothered, might still have you bothered, and how you're going to go forward in making sure that it doesn't continue to bother you so much. And so my hat is off to you. Is there anything you want to close on? Is there anything that you feel we missed?
My biggest thing I think that I wanted to talk about
Mhm.
was it's kind of heavy.
Let's
Two things.
let's let's unpack it.
Okay. So back to the athlete thing, which is like kind of, I know what we just talked about. But being a figure skater, like I've been a pair skater my whole life. And something that like I think I've really had to come to terms with lately is like I've struggled with an eating disorder probably since I was like 10 or 11.
Okay.
And I know that's like a huge cliche in skating. And I think it's a lot more common with people than like we think it is. Like I know it's like, oh, you're a figure skater, oh, you're a ballerina, and that's a big thing. But like in the world, and just being able, like that was one of the things that I like hyped myself up about was like, am I going to be able to talk to like Kevin and be like on the internet being like, I have struggled with an eating disorder. It's not something that has gone away. It's not something that it's just like you're cured and like things like that. I've also been treated for PTSD in the last 3 years. Another big thing, but just, and it was a girlfriend of mine that I had no idea and posted about, she had PTSD and I was just like, I had no idea. And she mentioned that like, we're such high functioning people that people are just like, oh, it's whatever. And one of the reasons I ended up getting help the first time was, I'll call them the powers that be, suggested I went to see a therapist. And that was my first time going to a therapist. I went through a traumatic event in 2017, like that summer. And I went back to tour, like normal as hell. Like, you know what? Like, it's just tour. We'll go back. And I didn't realize that mentally I was in such a horrible place that it just kind of snowballed. 2 years ago, if you'd asked me, like, there's no way I would have had the confidence in myself or the confidence or the confidence in myself to have sent you an email to be like, hey man, this is so cool. Like, I'd love to be a part of it. Like, I couldn't comfortably stand in a room full of people and say something because I ended up being in such a dark place and I had so much anxiety and stress and that I was a completely different person. And I thought I was broken. Like, I actually thought something was wrong with me. I was crazy, X, Y, and Z. And it wasn't till 2 years later when I was home with my shoulder that the powers that be, we'll call them, were like, we really like you to go see a psychologist. Like, we really want you to talk to someone. And you know that commercial, that mental health commercial where she's like hyperventilating and then she unzips herself and then like everything comes pouring out.
Right.
It's such, like, I didn't, like, until it happens to you, you don't really realize the like power behind it. But that's almost exactly what happened. Like, being able to talk to someone and learn that like my feelings are valid. Like, what happened to me is valid. My trauma is like, going back to like, my trauma was my trauma. Right. It doesn't belittle anyone else's. It doesn't take away from anything. Like, and having to do that homework and living with the trauma to the point where I can talk about it. Like, that was a huge, huge thing for me. And then we ended up touching on the whole eating disorder thing in like the same process, because it all kind of came back to like, I was so out of control in the sense that I felt like I had like, I couldn't control anything.
Right.
And back to like the self-talk thing, like it's just like when you see it on the internet, if you see and you hear and you say so much to yourself for so long, you believe it. Yeah. I'm 5'1" and I'm 110 pounds. Like, I am not a large human by any means. I'm quite short. But in figure skating, I was considered tall and I was too big for pair skating. Okay. Like, that was something that I got a lot. And like, from like, I was young, like really young. And then my safe place wasn't home. I got weighed at home. I got weighed at the rink, but like, skating was like my outlet kind of. So I didn't see the rink as a bad place, but like, I'd say like from 10 on, that was life. And that's what I thought was important. Like, I had to be under 100 pounds. There's photos of me from 2012 and I'm at nationals, was like the best year of my life, but I was 95 pounds and I looked sick. And I had friends in my life that were like, hey, like you look really skinny. And I'd be like, oh, thanks. Like, kind of like bat your head around it. And then it just, I think it's so common for people and like body image issues. And like, I came home and I think because I wasn't skating and we weren't in the environment, like you realize what an awful environment you were in and like the mindset you were in. And for me, like I think about and like I beat myself up for like how hard I was on myself and maybe how hard I was on other people because that's what I was programmed to think. And dealing with that, I don't know if like I like hockey, I'm sure you have like like a completely different side. Like you need to be bigger, you need to be stronger. And I think like as like a generation and as like a group and our age and things, like we put such pressure on being like the biggest or the strongest, and the girls put on this like big front of like, oh, I need to be so skinny. And I think about the things I went through to like obtain that, and i I just like it breaks me. And like it's still a thing. Like I'm not like, oh, I'm cured, I'm fine. Like I stepped on the scale for the first time in 6 months and like the world went really big, then really small, and then I didn't know what to do because there was a number I hadn't seen and for like pretty much my whole life, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And like that's another thing that like I've had to cope with and talk about, and like the PTSD and the stress and that on top of it, because I was so stressed out and I was so anxious. I wasn't eating, and then I was doing 12 shows a week, and then it was like, oh well, she looks really good, and like, oh look how high she gets thrown in the air. And like I did it, like it wasn't necessarily the people around me, because it wasn't like in competitive skating I would say it was. And I had a like a I'll say like a close person in my life that was very much like, oh, are you gonna eat that? Like, oh, you should, like, are you gonna weigh yourself today? And like I think I've just beat myself up about it as an adult. And that's like, you're trained, we're so ingrained to think a certain way, and like we have to, like as athletes, we have to be perfect. And like it just, I think people overlook what it does to us, because I'm sure like in hockey you've had similar like instances of like, well, like I need to be this, I need to be that, like, and because you're told, or like someone's like, oh, you're not that good, and then you're like, oh, but I need to like be better because I don't want people to say that.
Um,
Sorry,
first,
I just like
no,
unloaded on you.
no.
Like
I'm
you're on the internet.
just like catching everything and filing it, and now I'm going to try to contextualize all of that. I first want
Yeah,
to
I just like,
get it out. Sorry, what was that?
I was just like, I just unloaded on this poor guy, and I've been thinking about this all day. I'm like, these are things I
Just,
really want to talk about, and like I think it needs to be said. And then yeah, I just like
you nailed it. It all goes to themes around expectation, around pressures we put on kids, pressures we put on ourselves. Um, you know, juice being worth the squeeze might be one of them, right? And so you're a competitive skater. You're you know, call it, if at 5'1", 95 pounds is what you need to be. We're going to say, for the sake of this discussion, is what
yeah,
you need to be in order to be thrown around as a figure skater. But so now from the age of 10 years old, you're told, hey, like if you want to be this, you got to be this, except but you got to be this is all going to be a series of self-analyzing, self-destructive, unhealthy diet, body image, shellacking that you're going to put yourself through until the age of,
I was 22, or I'm 28 now,
right.
but yeah.
So these expectations that, so you have the expectation that you want to be the best. And so you have the expectation you put on yourself as to how you're going to be that heavy. You've got the expectation from your coaches, powers that be, whether it's parents, peers, right? Of the constant, like, maybe watch it, right? And so you've got all these pressures that are like creating this monster. And so again, back to the validation, no wonder, because from such a young age, you've been told or have placed the expectation on yourself. That's another thing to acknowledge too, is that, you know, everything, say, I've been through in hockey, I signed myself up for. I wanted it so bad that I was willing to take the shellacking, which I later find out at 27 in a therapy session that, yeah, when I'm sitting there going, oh, it's not a big deal. And it's like, that's a lot, right? It's a
Did
lot.
you ever feel like, I think back to like situations and it was like, you need to be this weight. And then as an athlete, you're like, okay, like
Oh,
this is what you need to do. And you don't question it because it's that
you,
person in your life and you're like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, like, hey Tay, you need to lose 10 pounds.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Like,
and
okay.
in a really, you know, that's most exemplified by, say, players that are like victims of sexual assault by their coaches, right? Which is something that, like,
Yeah.
hey, like, you need to do this in order to get to this, and I hold this power, and so you're going to do what I want. Fortunately, I wasn't under circumstances like that, but there's no doubt that along the way there was always like, hey, like, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to play this way, you're going to have to be this, and okay, all right. And it was all constructive. It was all, hey, like, do this. But then what would happen is, when you're here, you're constantly reaching for here. And when you get here, you're reaching for higher. And so nothing was ever good enough. So
Yeah.
now here I am, 27 years old. I never made it to the NHL. So was anything good enough? Ask me about it. Not a fucking thing. Now, healthy headspace. Hey, you know what? I tried my best and I came up short. But that destructive, self-sabotaging, bullying that you put yourself through when you're feeling inadequate, that stems from this young age moving away to play junior hockey. And, you know, I thought I did a good job. I find out in the video session I was shit. Ooh, okay.
Oh,
Now I got my whole like dressing room of 20 guys, like, expecting more of me. I got my coach definitely expecting more of me, to the point of like, okay, now I'm like not in the lineup. Now I'm traded. Right. And so this expectation, you're playing elite level hockey. Of course the expectation's high, but I think always kind of being at that under expectation while trying to be better takes a toll, especially over the course of years. And so I think that, in relating to myself, as I said, go sit down in therapy and ask, explaining my experiences and trying to downplay it, like, yeah, it wasn't good enough, whatever. And it's like, well, tell me more about that. And then to hear back from the other side, like, hey, like, that's a lot. Like, you were under a lot of pressure. You had the pressure you created, the pressure that the machine creates, and then anything else that might have been happening in your life that wasn't even sport, you
yeah.
know? And so, now that has been a huge, call it dismantling of, like, you have incredibly high standards of yourself. You project those incredibly high standards on everyone around you, to the point where you're constantly up in arms about pretty much everything you see, which starts
Yeah.
from questioning and not crediting everything that you do, right? Everything I do in a day, unless trying to see it through the lens of gratitude and all this peace and energy, well, then, yeah, nothing's ever good enough. And it is a
And
fight.
like it goes,
It's a
yeah.
fight
And like what you're saying
to
is
get.
like, we're always taught to like reach for this and then we're like chasing it, instead of like, if anywhere on that journey had you like stopped and like turned around and been like, wow, look at all I've done, I
Right?
think it would have been so different for so many of us. And I think, like, I don't think it's an athlete thing too. Like, it's that mentality of always wanting more and not being able to like stop and smell the roses and be like, look at all that I've accomplished behind me at this, like we're so focused on like what's next in the future, instead of like living in a present moment and like being, like you said, being grateful, finding the energy. And
Mm,
yeah, just
yeah.
I feel like everything just like came full circle like that, just like,
Yeah. I mean, again, back to validation. I come to you, I have a problem. I come to you, I tell you an experience. I share something with you, for you to say, oh, it couldn't have been that bad. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it could have been worse. Well, now I feel real alone. And now I'm discrediting, questioning my own concerns, right? Where, and that's even from a young age. Like, if a child is crying, right? There's some books that say, hey, they're crying. Like, you don't want to give them attention. They're crying. There's other books that say totally otherwise. Like, whoa, they
yeah,
need you. That's how they communicate. That's, and so, validation, whether good or bad. And then, of course, if say I go to my therapist and I understand how you're seeing it, but what if you could see it like this? Or do you think that thinking like this serves you? And all these questions that come with beyond the validation, but you're allowed to feel how you feel, right?
Yeah.
If you have a thought process and you're thinking a certain way, a certain thing, and it's bringing you down and bleeding into other aspects of your life, well, then let's talk about that, or talk about it to somebody who is prepared to have that discussion with you, whether as a friend support or a professional support or whoever else. But yeah, we have to talk. We have to get things off. We can't let things stew, boil. I know myself, if I have anything to share, good or bad, I have to share it. I have to speak. I have to get it out. And, something that has been a reoccurring theme in my recent success and journey and steps forward is forgiveness. And that's, forgiveness of self for having a shitty morning. That's forgiveness of others for, something that maybe happened a long time ago. Forgiveness of my inner child for that 12-year-old who XYZ and needs to be told, hey, there's nothing you could do, right? Because that's what trauma is. At some point, it's somewhere in, say, your childhood, my childhood, there's this kid who wasn't equipped to handle what was being thrown at him or her.
Yeah.
Right. And so, the more we look at why we're all feeling certain ways, the more we can kind of unravel that, unpack it, and then organize it so that it's no longer bothering us. And so forgiveness has been a huge, huge thing for me. That's been discussions with, people. Hey man, this has really been bothering me. I feel this way about this. Man, that's not it at all. This is what oh man, I'm so glad we had this talk. All right, love you, bro. Okay, cheers. Boom. I've had those discussions. I've had discussions that needed to be had, because whenever thoughts would arise around a person or a topic or whatever, it could crumble my entire day. Right. And so, that might be a discussion with your boss, which I've learned now through therapy to better navigate. Right. Because where maybe before I'd be like, fuck this is stupid, blah, blah, blah. I'm mad about and upset about all these things.
And then it just keeps building, and then you're just mad at everything.
Heavier, until finally it's, hey man, can we have a discussion? Yeah, sure. What's going on? Hey man, this is going on and I feel this way about this, and I understand that. And it's a back and forth, and it's not me going in there flipping the table and a big FU match. It's me taking those original FUs, breathing through them, organizing them in a way where it's like, all right, you know what if it's not like that? It's like this. What if I'm misunderstanding this and I'm just angry about what I think it is? And so let's go have a talk. And so I can right now on almost two hands count of very important conversations I've had that were basically around hey man, I just have to get this out. Whenever I think about this, it's got me really agitated, really angry. No, dude, no. All right, well, that's a conversation we had to have. Or there's an apology both ways and an acknowledgement of how to move forward. And well, now I'm relieved of all that anger that eats me up when I let it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, again, going off on a long-winded spiel.
We're both just vomiting things to the internet, the powers that be. Here's my trauma. Here's this. Beautiful. Having adult conversations. Look how we've grown from athletes to people.
Wow, of course. And I hope that, you're able to, I think about my discussions and how I speak and conversations I'm having with people and, people in my circles and people outside of my circles. And it's slowly becoming more and more how are you feeling? I feel good, or I feel bad, or, we are experiencing feelings all day long. And so why do we feel that we can't talk about just our feelings? Right.
Yeah.
And so to normalize discussion around how you feel, how to maintain good feelings, and how to manage bad feelings is something that is basically never ending, because you'll always have a bad feeling, negative thought appear. And when they do, and somebody says, how you feeling? You can say, honestly, like, this has been really bothering me. Like, I don't know if it should or what. And then somebody can say, well, hey, man, like, totally understand. And yes, you should feel that way. So what are your next steps towards figuring that out?
Like
The less you have
normalizing
built
it.
up, the easier it is to, deal with it. But as, somebody who lets things build up, by the time you get to it, it's like I said, a big machine or a big mess that you got to like dismantle. And so it's just a constant maintenance,
And just like, and like for me, it's just like other people, and mental health is such a thing. And like self-care and like how you feel, like you only get one life, you only get one body. And
mm-hmm.
being able to, like you said, like openly talk about it, and it not be such a big deal. Like there's no reason that I had to hype myself up for like 6 weeks to send you an email. Like there's no, like there's no reason for it. There's no, like, I think it's just such, people just don't want to be a bother, and people don't want to be seen as weak. But like you're not being weak. I like almost like, I think like even me coming here and like having this conversation, the conversations we've had, I think I've grown and even like been a stronger person to be like, look what I can accomplish. Like, look how far I've come from X, Y, and Z. And I hope other people can like see this and like, or listen to this and be like, hey, like, you know what, like maybe it's time that I reach out to like my person or whatever. And that like people can get relief from it. Like I know even like our small conversations of just like the little relatable things that we've had, like hockey and skating, and as people in like transitioning and change, like I know that like even these have been like a huge relief, being like, okay, like okay, I'm not the only one feeling this. And I think that was like a really cool thing, and that was why I reached out in the first place. So
no,
and I get to be a part of it, so I was like, yeah, cool.
No, and a big part of it, like anytime we're able to have these discussions that go out for people to see, it's so important for those that get to be able to watch. And whether people can relate to us directly or relate to what we've had to say, I think we've covered a pretty general variety of like themes that can be applied to them. And I think anybody that gets to hear this will really benefit. And I appreciate your vulnerability and your want to be part of it. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for like giving me this opportunity to, like, I feel like I took a lot of big steps today, and like I'm just so appreciative of you and what you're doing and like everything about this. So thank you for all that you're doing as well. So
hey, well, thank you. Till next time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
I think we nailed it.
Crushed it.
I think we crushed it. Excellent job.
I think we did too.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate the support. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. See here a link to anything that's happened thus far with the campaign and where you'll find anything else that'll continue to happen with it. Hope you guys enjoyed this interview. Don't be shy to like, share, comment, all that good stuff to ensure that we can continue having these conversations within our communities, our homes, and amongst each other. Understand that you're not alone and reach out in a time of need. Also see here a link to my Just Giving page in support of Action Mental Health Northern Ireland, as well as stay tuned for the following credits showing a list of resources here in Dryden and surrounding area.